Stocks see broad-based selling as the rupee weakens but is off the lows of the day. The declines, however, far outnumber the advances. Some rupee sensitives like IT stocks gain while utilities, energy, industrials and autos slide.
The rupee breaches the 90 mark against the dollar on tight dollar supply and a delay in clinching the US trade deal. While importers and those with overseas leverage brace for impact, companies with sizable exports like Bajaj Auto cheer the gradual decline.
Meesho's 2,400 crore rupee anchor offer draws a rush of investors, but high allotment to a local fund miffs some of them who walk away. Even as its IPO opens to the public today, the founders promise that they'll engage with the investors and build new revenue streams to create shareholder wealth.
Asian Paints MD and CEO Amit Singhal expects double-digit growth in the coming quarters with market share gains amid increased competition. He also aims for sales of 50,000 crore rupees in 4 years with a promise of strong shareholder returns.
Good afternoon, you're with us here on Business Lunch. We are coming to you live from the CNBC TV18 Motilal Oswal studios. I'm Hormis Patakia, with me Arundhati Ramanan. Arundhati, good afternoon. It's been it's been that kind of a day, right, for the markets. At least they're trying to defend that 25,900 mark on the downside. We slipped below it, made an intraday low of 25,891. And since then, we've been meandering around this 25,930, 25,950 zones. And leading the charge down has been the PSU banks. It's been a dual blow for them. But we'll talk about that as the show goes on. But there are some pockets that you wanted to speak about as well.
Absolutely. Like you pointed out, there's been broad-based selling across Nifty, Sensex, and the mid-cap index actually faring worse than both the Nifty and Sensex. But there was some, specs where we could see some green. It was those IT stocks that are faring better than everyone else, bucking the trend. If you see Wipro, TCS and Infosys, all of them gaining between 1 and 2%. We're also seeing some recovery in big banking names like ICICI Bank and Axis Bank as well, Hormaz.
So, they are the ones that are ensuring that the Nifty doesn't slip further, right? TCS and Infosys that they are. But yes, the IT sensitives, as Arundhati was just mentioning, the rupee sensitives, the IT stocks. But now it costs 90 rupees 25 paise to buy a dollar. Now, the Indian rupee has taken a sharp knock yet again today. There's a 0.5% fall in the face of incessant dollar buying by foreign funds. The RBI was reported to be selling dollars through PSU banks, but in limited quantities. Lata is now here with more on today's fall. Lata.
Yes, dollars high today was, I believe, 90.29. And nothing to say that it won't get more expensive. The reason has been what it has been for some time now. The persistent selling by foreign funds, if you looked at the numbers only for December 1 and 2, it's already over $500 million. So expectation is that they're not going to stop selling anytime soon. The position of the dollar-rupee exchange rate much depends on how the Reserve Bank is behaving. What dealers tell us is that they are supplying dollars through what they call agent banks, basically PSU banks, but they're not trying to support any level or, stop the dollar rise at any point. They're just supplying enough to ensure that the volatility is not too sharp. And that perhaps is making importers come in and buy because people were mostly betting that the dollar won't go above 90 rupees. So now there are quite clearly some positions that whenever there's a spike like this, importers run in to buy, but exporters don't sell immediately because there's always a feeling that you may get a little more. The market is now convinced that the Reserve Bank is wantonly allowing or having a hands-off approach or a slightly hands-off approach because a cheaper rupee or an expensive dollar corrects the distortion by itself because your exports will become cheaper and therefore your export kitty grows and imports will become expensive. So that also reduces the trade deficit on its own. With today's move, of course, it's over 2% fall in just 2 weeks. That is from November 18th, the day on which the October trade deficit was announced. So clearly that looks like the number that has sparked the fall. I just want to leave you with one thought, that we tend to speak about a rupee fall in kind of depressed notes, like a stock market fall. No, it is not. It also not just benefits exporters like IT stocks, it benefits the entire economy because imports become cheap. It is easier for an Indian toy maker or a textile maker to beat the Chinese import, in all these categories. when the rupee is cheaper. So it's actually not bad for the economy. We must get that straight in terms of, the impact of a rupee fall.
All right, Lata, many thanks for taking us through those details. And in fact, earlier today, we spoke to former MPC member and economist Ashima Goyal and V. Lakshmanan of Federal Bank as the rupee fell 5% to fresh record lows of 90.14 against the dollar in the backdrop for an RBI policy due on Friday. Let's listen in to what they had to say.
The RBI has, of course, never really brought in currency as a core factor in its monetary policy statement dissemination. A side eye would always be there. To which extent the policy will definitely take cognizance of that, and to which extent a rate outcome that's going to come later this week will definitely be looked into. Having said so, in as much as we as bankers may wish a commentary on the currency to be brought out, I would state that yes, the fact that the rupee has weakened above 90 would be noted. But the policy statement would clearly, again, hinge upon the broader parameters of inflation and growth in the wider statement that's going to come by. And that is, I think, is going to be the way the statement is going to be worded to the specific question you asked.
For a long time, RBI's policy has been to prevent excess volatility and persistent real misalignments. So I think they still come in when it is getting too far away from equilibrium. So, and this regime is working. They have reserves and other ways of intervention. So the interest rate is not tied to the rupee. The interest rate has to respond to domestic inflation and growth. I don't think there is any sort of major financial stability concern here. I think that it is very important that the RBI indicates to the market that they are there to prevent excess volatility.
So now how does this fall in the currency have the sectors across the board? Sudarshan is here with more details on this. Sudarshan.
So equity market has been under pressure over the last 2 or 3 days, but it's the currency market which has stolen the limelight, and the main reason the fall in the rupee we have seen today, it has hit the record low of 90.29 against a dollar. So we have tried to find out which all sectors might benefit or which all sectors might have a negative impact. So first and top of the list is the IT sector, which is going to be impacted positively because most of the companies from this sector have a huge exposure to the US and they generate revenue in the dollar. So any fall in the rupee is largely seen as positive for IT sector. Second comes as the pharma sector. It has a limited impact because most of the companies hedge their dollar exposure, but one negative factor is that because of the rupee's fall, input costs see a sharp rise, and for most of the pharma companies, 40 to 60% of total costs are contributed for inputs, and that's the reason it might be a bit negative. For the auto sectors, amongst two-wheelers, two of the biggest beneficiaries are TVS Motor and Bajaj Auto. For TVS Motor, of total volumes, 30% comes from exports, and of total revenue, almost 25 to 26% comes from the export. For Bajaj Auto, almost 50% of total revenue comes from the exports, and in Q2, dollar realization was 87.1. So I've done a calculation. In Q3, dollar realization has increased to 89. And while talking to CNBC TV18, company has said if there is a fall of rupee 1 against dollar, annualized EBITDA increased by rupees 200 crores. So we'll do the calculation and get to know that there is a benefit in the range of 350 to 400 crore in the annualized EBITDA for Bajaj Auto. In the auto ancillaries, I have taken 3 names: Bharat Forge, Samvardhana Motherson and Minda. For Samvardhana Motherson, it's marginal positive because almost 60 to 70% of their revenue comes from exports, but they have manufacturing base over there, and because of that, costs rise as well. That's the reason it's marginal positive. For Bharat Forge, almost 70% of their revenue are from the export segment, and it's hugely positive because they have the majorly 3 segments. One is Class 8, then they have PV EV components, and one they have the high margin business, that's the forging business. And because of the fall in rupee, their revenue will see a significant increase. While for Minda, it's negative because they are largely a domestic based revenue. 70% 60% of revenue comes from domestic segment. Now coming to the oil and gas sector, for ONGC and Oil India, rupee 1 depreciation improves EPS by 1 to 2%. For Reliance, it's a mixed impact. For city gas companies, it's negative. And lastly, for chemical sector, it's hugely positive for majority of the companies.
All right, Sudarshan, many thanks for taking us through those details. Earlier today, we spoke to Rakesh Sharma, the Executive Director of Bajaj Auto, on the impact of the rupee fall on their business. Listen in to what he had to say.
You know, the softly devaluing rupee is very beneficial, as you said, to a company like ours, which has got almost 50% of its revenue coming from international sources. So it's very, very helpful. Well, you know, on an annualized basis, every 1 rupee creates a EBITDA impact of 200 crores plus, you know, because our exports are over $2 billion.
Let's also now get you some updates on the Vodafone Idea AGR relief issue. Sources are telling CNBC TV18 that the Cabinet Secretary has called for a meeting with the Finance and Telecom Secretaries tomorrow afternoon, which will take place at around 3 p.m. Remember, the Telecom Minister had told CNBC TV18 that a relief package for the company could be proposed by the end of the year. Vodafone Idea currently around 3.5% higher at 10.5, still below that FPO price of 11 rupees.
On that note, it is time for us to slip into a short break. But before we go, here's some good news for our viewers. India's business news leader is now a click away, introducing CNBC TV18's all-new app. Get instant access to breaking news, in-depth articles, and financial world updates at your fingertips. Download the CNBC TV18 app now from the Apple Store or Google Play Store, or just scan the QR code on your screen. Welcome back. You're watching Business Lunch. Meesho's 5,421 crore rupee IPO has opened today, with the retail portion fully subscribed within 1 hour of opening. The IPO comprises of 4,250 crore rupees of fresh issue and a 1,171 crore rupee offer for sale. The price band is fixed at 105 to 111 rupees a piece. Earlier, we spoke to the management of the company to understand their outlook. Take a look.
We as a company look at free cash flow as the right bottom line metric. Any company textbook definition of valuation is the net present value of all your future cash flows. And as a company, we've been the most capital efficient asset light company, right? Like, to kind of reach a lot of milestones in our business, we've actually spent the least amount of money as compared to many other e-commerce companies in India. And we take pride in that. We continue to kind of optimize for free cash flow. If you look at the last 2 financial years, we have been positive on free cash flow. For the last financial year 25, we generated almost 1,000 crores of cash. And even forward, I think we will continue to kind of keep looking at that while doing capital allocation within the company.
If you look at the use of proceeds, we are raising these for the next 3 years. I think that is our estimate of, what is the spend going to be in some of these headers for the next 3 years. And if you look at the historical trends, as we have grown consistently, some of our fixed cost base, such as our server infrastructure and other kind of fixed cost line items, including employee cost as well, have not grown at the same path or at the same pace as our overall top line growth has been. So operating leverage is a key metric that we would kind of keep tracking. Our fixed cost base, let's say historically, the server cost grew by only 4.5% when we grew at about 35%. And we'll keep maintaining that going forward as well.
70% the overall subscription of the Meesho IPO so far on its first day. The retail portion, as Arundhati was highlighting, fully subscribed, and current subscription figures at around 2.5 times already. Now, moving on to the widely discussed Sanchar Sathi app. According to recent developments, the Telecom Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia told the Lok Sabha that they will make changes on the basis of feedback from users. Listen to what he had to say.
ऐप फोन पे है, इसका मतलब नहीं है कि वो ऑटोमेटिकली ऑपरेट हो जाएगा। जब तक मैं उपभोक्ता के रूप में उसमें रजिस्टर ना करूं, तब तक वो ऑपरेट नहीं होगा। और मैं उपभोक्ता के आधार पर, जैसे मेरे फोन पर सर ढेर सारे ऐप्स होते हैं, मैं उस ऐप को भी दबा के मैं डिलीट कर सकता हूं। तो ये लोकतंत्र में पूर्ण हक और अधिकार नागरिक का है सर। हम लोग ने केवल ये ऐप सभी को उपलब्ध कराने के लिए कदम लिया है, लेकिन फिर भी मैं सदन के पटल पे भी कहना चाहता हूं, हमारा कोई हट नहीं। इसकी सफलता का प्रयोग जनता के आधार पर हुआ है। फीडबैक हमें मिलेगा, उस फीडबैक के आधार पर अगर उस ऑर्डर में भी हम लोगों को कोई चेंज लाना है, उसके लिए भी हम लोग तैयार हैं।
On that note, it is time for us to head into a short break, but more news and updates coming up on the other side. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. Now all eyes will be on Russian President Vladimir Putin, who will be on a two-day visit to India starting tomorrow. We have Parikshit, who is joining in to give us a lowdown on what to expect from this trip. Parikshit.
Well, this is the 23rd India-Russia annual summit. The entire bilateral partnership between the two countries will be up for discussion and review between tomorrow and day after. What we're also picking up, that this time, the big focus will be on broadening the economic partnership between the two countries. Both sides will be discussing an FTA. Will it be signed during this visit of President Putin? Very unlikely. But yes, there is a plan to sign an FTA sometime in future if the negotiations are concluded and it is mutually acceptable to both sides as well. Both sides will be speaking about expanding the bilateral trade in a sustainable manner. There will be a package of outcomes that this visit could really yield, and this would include MOUs, agreements on economic cooperation, trade facilitation, maritime cooperation, healthcare, science and technology, education as well. One of the highlights would be an MOU on migration and mobility of skilled professionals from India to Russia. Now, we've seen the movement of many Indians via illegal routes or being caught up in scams and landing up fighting for the Russian army or being involved in services linked to the Russian army. We want to avoid that and give a legal way for migration and mobility of skilled professionals. We will also see discussions being held to improve connectivity between the two countries, and this could be via the Chennai-Vladivostok route or the Northern Sea route as well. India will also seek long-term and stable supplies of fertilizers from Russia. Now, this is a very critical partnership in terms of a fertilizer supply chain, and we would like to have long-term supplies coming in from there as well. In terms of defense, this is a major area of focus between the two countries. But considering that the United States is pushing us right now to buy F-35 fifth-generation fighter jets, it is unlikely that any major aircraft deal could be signed during this visit, but upgrades, maintenance of the Sukhois, maintenance of the current weapon platforms, buying missiles for the current Russian origin defense platforms that India uses, all of that could be up for discussion. We would also discuss opportunities for co-production and co-development of defense platforms, including exports to third countries of the BrahMos as well. Now, the bilateral trade between India and Russia had reached $68.7 billion by FY25. Things are skewed in Russia's favor. For example, India's exports were just about 4.8 billion. We imported 63.8 billion worth of goods from Russia, and this is primarily because of imports of oil and gas from Russia. We would like to bridge this trade deficit and push exports of pharmaceutical items, agriculture and textiles. So these three items will figure in discussions between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin over the next 2 days.
So Putin's visit to India, two-day visit to India, begins tomorrow. Parikshit, thank you so much for taking us through those details. Now, after weeks of turmoil over a US-backed peace plan, the high-stakes Kremlin meeting has now concluded. Russian President Vladimir Putin held nearly 5 hours of closed-door talks with US President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and presidential advisor Jared Kushner. Washington is pushing to salvage a potential deal to end the almost 4-year war in Ukraine, and the completion of these talks marks one of the most significant US-Russia engagements since the conflict began. The meeting wraps up amid fresh warnings from Moscow to European nations, deepening concerns in Kiev and across Europe about where negotiations are headed. Kremlin foreign policy aide Yuri Ushakov briefed reporters after the talks, calling it a useful discussion, but acknowledging that they are no closer to resolving the crisis in Ukraine and that there is much work to be done.
All eyes on the Fed meeting and all eyes on Vladimir Putin's visit. But shifting focus to the Fed meeting, US President Donald Trump has announced plans to reveal his choice for the next Fed chair in early 2026. He also hinted that National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett has a potential candidate. Listen.
I want to thank you all for being here. It's a great group. And I guess a potential Fed chair is here, too. I don't know. Are we allowed to say that? Potential. He's a respected person, that I can tell you. Thank you, Kevin.
And with that, it is a wrap on this edition of Business Lunch. Mid-Cap Radar comes up next.